Greetings and welcome to Boring History for Sleep, dear listener. I'm delighted you've decided to accompany me on this journey back in time to explore the wild world of medieval pastimes and entertainment. Regardless of where you are in the world at the moment, morning, afternoon, evening, or the witching hour, and I invite you to settle in. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from and what time of day it is in your little corner of the world. If you enjoy serene, quirky storytelling that vividly brings history to life, I humbly invite you to subscribe so you don't miss any of our soporific journeys into the past. However, you don't have to worry about any of that right now. All you need to do is relax, breathe deeply, and let me, the Mongolian queen who wrote letters with sheep fat ink, you open your eyes to the soft gray light of a Mongolian dawn. There's no alarm clock, no phone buzzing with reminders, just the gentle flap of canvas above your head and the slow breath of horses somewhere beyond the yurt wall. The air smells faintly of boiled milk, wind-dried wool, and smoke from the dung-fueled stove, still warm from last night. Outside, the steppe stretches in every direction, flat as a thought, yet alive with motion clouds crawling over the sky, grasses whispering secrets, and somewhere in the distance, a bird trying out its morning complaints. Welcome to the 13th century. You're not Genghis Khan, sorry to disappoint. You're a servant, a record keeper of sorts, tasked with assisting the queen herself, Sorgatani Beki, one of the most powerful and least remembered women in Mongol history. Congratulations! You have arrived at one of history's great, quiet corners, the kind no epic poem bothers to mention. You'll mostly be watching people write letters, drink tea, and occasionally argue over sheep placement, and you probably won't make it through this day. If you do happen to stay awake, you might learn how a royal Mongolian woman wielded ink like a sword, how diplomacy could be quieter than war, and how sheep fat was once a viable office supply. Gently weird, but there you go. Before we wander deeper into the folds of this forgotten world, a soft request. If you find yourself enjoying this sleepy stroll through time, you're warmly invited to like, subscribe, and maybe even share this channel with a friend who needs a boring history to drift off to. Drop a comment with your location and the local time. It's oddly satisfying knowing who else is out there, dozing through dynasties with us. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You duck out of the yurt into the morning light. The queen's camp is already stirring. Banners ripple in the breeze colors. You don't quite recognize Sorgatani's household is nomadic but orderly, like a parade that forgot where it was marching. Her sons are grown now, future khans, warlords in waiting. But today, the camp is quiet. No battles, no messengers galloping in with dust-coated news. Just another peaceful day for the woman who once outmaneuvered generals and governors alike. With a sharp mind and letters written in sheep fat ink. That's right, ink made with rendered sheep fat, soot, and water. It dries matte, smudges easily, and is surprisingly durable. You will get some on your sleeve later. Everyone does. You step past a row of low tables where scribes are sharpening brushes. They nod at you like co-conspirators in a silent rebellion against forgetting. Most of their work today will involve correspondence in classical Mongolian, Uyghur script, and when things get spicy Persian. Multilingual bureaucracy is kind of the vibe here. Sorgatani herself isn't out yet. She tends to rise slowly, Not out of laziness, but preference. She's the sort of woman who makes you wait and then makes you glad you did. Historians still debate whether she dictated her letters in person or edited them by candlelight. Either way, her fingerprints are on everything. Not literally. Of course, she's not dipping her hands in ink, but metaphorically, the way every ruling matriarch leaves soft indentations on the world. You're handed a warm bowl of Arag fermented mare's milk. It's tangy, fizzy, and not something your modern stomach appreciates. Still, it's polite to sip. Nearby, an old woman is humming tunelessly while plucking feathers for quills. She smells like dry felt and victory. A breeze cuts across the camp. You wrap your robe a little tighter and look to the east. There, over the horizon, are the faint shapes of riders' couriers from another khanate, or possibly herders, with very dramatic posture. It's hard to tell at this distance. You squint dramatically anyway. Everyone else is doing it. One of the scribes hands you a slip of parchment. Practice, he says. The script loops like tangled thread. You try copying it. It looks like a goat-tried calligraphy. He laughs quietly and returns to his brushwork. So much for your promotion. And just like that, the queen emerges. She doesn't wear a crown because Mongols don't do crowns. Instead, her headdress is a tower of fabric, beads, and subtle authority. She walks slowly, nods to no one, and seats herself beside a stack of parchment that could fund a coup in the right hands. Begin, she says, and so the letters begin, diplomatic, exacting. Not a single sheep-fat stroke out of place. You try to keep up, but the sun is warm. The paper rustles like lullabies, and the soft clip-clop of distant hooves lulls you further into this quietly powerful woman's world. Just don't spill the ink. The ink. You blink, and it's mid-morning. The sunlight has grown bold, stretching itself across the landscape like a cat that's absolutely certain of its own importance. Cleared. The scribes have settled into their version of rhythm, heads bowed, brushes whispering over parchment, sleeves slowly darkening with streaks of black. You sit slightly too close to one of the inkpots, which now features a delicate fingerprint, shaped like failure. Sorgatani hasn't looked at you directly yet, which is, in fact, a compliment. She only looks at you when she's correcting you, and you're still early in your mistakes. Cherish it while it lasts. Today's letters concern grain allocations in the Oxus Valley, the confirmation of a governor's replacement due to persistent lateness and dramatic beard maintenance, and a gift list for a distant Chinese envoy who loves fine textiles and bad poetry. You consider that a form of bravery. The queen speaks in short phrases, her voice like rain soft but insistent. A courtier murmurs translations. You do your best to write, but your ink clots, your wrist aches, and you vaguely miss pens. But this slow grind of brush to page, repetition to memories how empires last longer than their emperors. Historical fact, time Sorgatani was the widow of Tolui, son of Genghis Khan, and mother to 4 sons who all became Khans-Menengi, Kublai, Hulagu, and Arik Bey. This is not a spoiler. It's a resume. She governed lands stretching from Persia to northern China, all while avoiding palace drama, assassins, and the very real logistical challenge of running an empire from a tent that moves every season. The smell of dried mutton wafts over. Lunch is on its way. Meanwhile, a courier finally arrives. Not the dramatic riders from before those turned out to be shepherds with posture issues, but a proper silk-sashed envoy bearing a scroll tied with red thread. Her face stays perfectly still. You try to read her expression, which is like trying to decode a painting of a cloud. She hums once. Reply, she says, already turning away. The scribes leap into motion. One of them rolls his eyes with the practiced grace of a man who's rewritten the same answer 20 times. It's a letter about falcon ownership rights. Again, obscure tidbit alert. Among the Mongol elite, falcons were not only prized hunting companions, but also occasional diplomatic gifts. It's like trying to schedule shared custody of a particularly aggressive paper airplane. The queen takes a break. She walks among her attendants, offering no commentary, only presence. Her steps are measured, as if she's tracing a pattern only she can see. Someone offers her a boiled dumpling, which she accepts with imperial disinterest. You take one too. It's unexpectedly spicy. Historians still debate, murmurs one of the older scribes, whether she ever intended for her sons to rule, or if she just didn't trust anyone else to do the job. He chuckles softly, then returns to his ink. His brushwork is so precise it could split hairs, possibly has, once or twice. You look around. The camp isn't quiet, not really. There's constant motion, threads being dyed, wheels repaired, treaties translated, but it moves with such sleepy precision that your brain has stopped interpreting it as noise. Instead, it hums around you, like a lullaby you forgot you remembered. Another breeze rolls through. You catch sight of the queen's headdress again, tilted slightly in the wind. She's seated now, overlooking the scribes, eyes half-lidded, hands folded. She might be napping. She might be plotting. It's hard to say. You yawn. You're not alone. Ink dries. Birds cry somewhere in the blue. And across the golden sea of the steppe, the future slowly, patiently waits. By early afternoon, the sun has shifted its angle, casting long shadows across the camp, like a reminder that time keeps moving, even when everyone else is still trying to finish one more sentence. The air is dry, but not hot, and there's a sort of sleepy shimmer rising off the distant hills. You've stopped keeping track of how many letters have been written, possibly 30, possibly just the same one rewritten with increasing irritation. Sorgatani has returned to her yurt for a short rest, not a nap, exactly more like a strategic pause in visibility. Her absence allows the rest of the camp to take a collective breath. Horses are watered, boots are mended, and someone is loudly failing to tune a two-stringed fiddle nearby. You pretend not to notice. You stretch your legs, brushing dust from your robes, and wander a little. Not far there are still eyes on you, even when there are no words being spoken. But curiosity wins. You find yourself walking toward the cluster of tents that house the supply scribes and the royal kitchen, to places where real gossip lives, camouflaged in logistics. A young boy, maybe 12, maybe ancient, offers you a sliver of dried cheese that appears to have the density of a meteorite. You accept it politely and nearly break a tooth. He laughs. Somewhere, this is probably a rite of passage. Inside the supply tent, a woman is inventorying sacks of rice with a brush made of horsehair and judgment. She doesn't look up as you enter, looking for the ink. She says flatly, "You already used too much. I only spilled a little." That's what everyone says. Until we run out and have to boil another sheep. She's not joking, yes. Here's your weird cultural tidbit. The ink Sorgatani scribes use is a closely guarded recipe that includes soot, boiled sheep fat, and water strained through clean felt. It's surprisingly long-lasting and mildly terrifying to prepare. You suspect the supply tent is guarded more tightly than the treasury. You thank her and leave before she assigns you to stirring duty, which sounds much more ominous than it should. Back at the main tent, the queen has returned. Her demeanor hasn't changed, calm, composed, with that glimmer of something behind her eyes that says she knows more than anyone and enjoys it. She resumes dictation. The scribes shuffle papers, refill ink pots, and resume their work. Dance with history. This next letter is addressed to an Abbasid vizier in Baghdad, and it requires a degree of courtesy that borders on theatrical. You transcribe slowly, tongue between your teeth, trying not to mess up the honorifics. The queen says them effortlessly, as if she were born fluent in diplomacy. She wasn't, of course. Sorgatani was born a Karat princess, raised in a Christian household, married off into the Mongol royal line, and left widowed before she turned 30. What followed wasn't mourning, it was maneuvering. She secured positions for her sons, advised on military appointments, and sent more letters than most generals could count. Her influence was measured not in blood spilled, but in scrolls sent. That's your major historical fact for the hour. By the way, outside, the wind picks up. A low hum rises from the grasslands, a constant, quiet reminder that nature is louder than politics. If only you listen long enough. A distant figure on horseback passes over a ridge, not a threat. Not today. You pause your writing to rub your wrist. Your fingers are starting to curl like overcooked noodles. One of the older scribes sees you and nods knowingly. First time you nod, he pulls something from his sleeve and hands it to you. A smooth riverstone, polished from years of idle fidgeting. Grip it between letters, he says. Helps. You try it. It does help, sort of. Mostly, it just gives your hand something to complain about other than the brush. The queen pauses. She looks up at the scribes, then at the rest of the tent. Who has read this letter to me? Nobody moves. You think maybe you misheard. She repeats herself. Who has read this version aloud? A scribe at the edge stands, scroll in hand. Not yet, Highness, she gestures. Do it now. He reads, slowly, clearly. The Uyghur script curls like smoke in the air. Her eyes narrow once. Too long. There's a beat. Everyone knows better than to argue. Cut the first paragraph, she says. The vizier already knows what year it is. Another beat, and then everyone moves, crossing out, rewriting, and restamping. You almost laugh. You've never seen such coordinated panic executed so quietly. It's like a dinner party where the host realizes the soup is poison but insists everything is perfectly fine. Historians still debate. The older scribe murmurs to you whether she actually knew all the languages her letters were written in, or if she was just very good at pretending. You're not sure which answer is more impressive. Outside, the sun begins to dip. Evening's gold begins to slide across the tents, catching in silk hems and horsehair brushes. You exhale slowly, feeling the edge of fatigue brush against your thoughts. The queen is still writing, still dictating, still making history in soft lines and soft words. Without raising her voice once, you glance down at your ink-stained hands, then at the scrolls piled beside you. It's going to be a long evening. The light changes slowly, as if reluctant to leave. Evening over the Mongolian steppe is not a dramatic sunset. Not here. It is subtle cooling air, lengthening shadows, the kind of hush that tells you the world is ready to exhale. The sky fades from steel blue to the pale amber of lukewarm tea, and you realize how long you've been sitting. The queen still hasn't stopped. She paces now, quietly, behind the scribes. Her presence is not restless, it's deliberate. She walks like someone who has memorized the weight of silence, who knows exactly how much attention to draw without saying a word. Her steps are soft, barely heard over the scratching of brushes, but everyone hears them anyway. You keep writing. Your fingers are stiff, your brush tip beginning to split like a tired reed. You try to fix it and only manage to smear a few characters. Beyond recognition, you quietly switch to a new one. The ink clings to your skin like guilt. A light dinner is brought out. Boiled dumplings, thick slices of horse meat, and a stew that seems to consist entirely of root vegetables and regret. You eat slowly, chewing longer than necessary, just to give your hands a break. No one talks, not because they're forbidden to, but because food time is precious. Mongols may be mobile, but they do not multitask when it comes to eating. The queen eats separately, just inside her yurt, surrounded by attendants who refill her bowl without asking. She doesn't eat much, maybe 3 dumplings, a few spoonfuls of broth, and a piece of something that looks like pickled radish, but might just be very confident garlic. One of the younger scribes whispers that she fasts often. Some say it's religious discipline. Remember, she was raised in the Nestorian Christian tradition. Others say it's political theater. Still others say she simply doesn't like stew. Historians, as always, still debate it. You finish your meal and return to your spot. The ink has cooled, and the wind has picked up, carrying dust and the faint scent of sheep. A nearby tent flap bangs softly against its pole, like a tired drummer who refuses to stop practicing. A courier approaches the queen with another scroll, this one sealed with blue wax. A rare sign. It's a message from the Yuan court. One of her sons, likely Kublai, is requesting further counsel. You can't see the text, but the queen's expression tightens just enough to be noticeable. The kind of tightness a mother wears when she realizes her sons are now men with armies. She waves the courier off and takes a seat again. More dictation. The letter is full of subtle warnings, disguised as maternal concern. She's a master at this. Every compliment has an edge. Every reassurance comes with a condition. She never raises her voice, but her brush might as well be carved from bone. And now comes your obscure detail of the evening. Mongol diplomatic letters often included symbolic metaphors about the sky, rivers, and the movement of herds. Entire political agendas could be buried inside sentences about cloud patterns. Somewhere in this current letter is a veiled instruction about troop placement, disguised as praise for the fine pastures near the Yellow River. It's poetic and mildly threatening. You're starting to admire her from outside the yurt. The sounds of the camp settle into a kind of rhythm-quiet conversation. The occasional clink of bowls, and a horse shifting its weight with a long sigh. Someone starts playing the morincourt, the horsehead fiddle. The song is slow and sorrowful, which is exactly what you needed to remember how tired you are. The queen stops dictating for a moment. She's listening. The melody winds its way through the camp like a breeze that forgot where it came from. The notes aren't sad, exactly, just honest, as if the instrument remembers all the things the rest of the world politely agreed to forget. She nods once to no one in particular, then resumes her work. You pause your own brush and take in the moment. Her silhouette against the dimming light, the endless scrolls around her, and the scent of ink and mutton. You wonder if she ever rests, if the weight of raising for future cons and managing a continent has ever pressed down hard enough for her to feel it, or if she simply considers herself part of the steppe, always moving, always present, never quite still. The older scribe beside you clears his throat. She outlive us all, you know. You glance at him. She's the only person I've ever met who can write a threat and a blessing in the same sentence. You believe him. Outside, the air grows colder. The camp begins to quiet down fully. Scribes clean their brushes. The tents shift in the breeze. Horses are tied down. Fires are banked low. There's still work to be done, but the queen, finally, rises, her scrolls collected and sealed, her headdress casting a long shadow across the rugs. She does not say good night. She simply leaves. You remain seated for a moment longer. The brush is still in your hand, the ink now thickening into sleep. And somewhere just beyond hearing, the wind carries a phrase you wrote earlier that no one else will ever notice. The sky watches all but whispers, only to those who wait. A line dictated by the queen, or maybe one she stole from the clouds. You don't sleep in a bed. There are no beds here, not in the way you're used to. Just wool-stuffed bedding rolls and layered felt blankets, warm from the day's sun and stubborn with the scent of lanolin. You lie on your side in the scribe's tent, wedged between two men who each snore in distinct musical keys. Someone nearby is muttering in their sleep, possibly reciting supply inventories. The stars above, though obscured by fabric, feel painfully awake. You try to drift off. You do not drift off. Welcome to nomadic insomnia. Outside, the night moves quietly. The fires are mostly embers now, tiny red eyes blinking in the darkness. Horses shift gently in their lines. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. Somewhere, a pot clinks as someone washes. Up a little too enthusiastically for this hour. You sit up, quietly, carefully. You step over a dozing apprentice who's hugging a rolled scroll like it owes him money, and slip outside. The air is cold and clean, like biting into a particularly judgmental apple. Above you, the stars are spread across the sky with that impossible clarity only found far from lanterns, cities, or anything resembling convenience. The camp sleeps. Mostly, but not everyone. There, by the edge of her tent, sits the queen. Sorghaghtani, lit only by a small oil lamp, is writing. Alone. No attendants, no scribes. Just her, a thin brush, a scrap of parchment, and a silence too loud to ignore. You should go back to your tent. You do not go back to your tent. Instead, you sit a short distance away on a rolled carpet that smells like tea and camel. You pretend to look at the stars. You are, of course, watching her. She writes slowly now, far more carefully than during the day. You catch just a glimpse of the page, The characters are in Syriac script, one of the liturgical languages of the Nestorian Christian Church, not official correspondence, then not something for Kublai or Mungi. This is personal, a prayer, perhaps, or a memory, or both. There's a rumor, one that travels with the traders and the temple gossipers, that the queen keeps a private chronicle, not for posterity, not for history, just for herself. A record of what no one else remembers. And there's your obscure detail for the evening. Nestorian Christians, like the queen, often combined elements of local culture into their private ritual scriptural prayer written in Mongol verse. Incense mixed with steppe herbs and sacred songs set to the rhythm of hoofbeats. Faith was not rigid out here. It had to travel. She sighs once. The sound barely stirs the air. Then, softly, she speaks, not to you, to herself, or to the page. You can't quite make out the words, but the tone is unmistakable, tired, firm, and utterly unbroken. You sit a little straighter. This woman has outmaneuvered governors, negotiated with caliphs, written laws, raised for future rulers, and survived the aftermath of empire without vanishing into footnotes. And here she is, writing something no one will read. It's a gentle kind of power. Eventually, she finishes. She folds the parchment, seals it with wax, and slides it into a pouch at her side. No fanfare, no final flourish. She stands, adjusts her robe, and looks at you. Yes, you. You freeze like a child caught stealing honey. She doesn't smile, but she also doesn't look away. Instead, she speaks with the dry amusement of someone who's seen many people try to pretend they weren't watching her, couldn't sleep either. You nod dumbly. Too much ink, it gets in the blood. You manage a quiet. She walks over and sits beside you. This is not normal. You do not comment for a moment. There is only the wind and the stars and the distant squeak of a saddle being adjusted by some poor soul on night watch. She says nothing, just watches the sky as if scanning it for Thai POS. Then, the thing no one tells you about being in charge is how often you have to repeat yourself. You glance at her, unsure whether this is rhetorical. You tell them the same thing 10 different ways, through law, through letters, through dinner, and still they mishear you. You nod to monologue at midnight. She turns her head toward you. I only ever wanted one thing. A future where my sons didn't have to rule with swords. You want to, but you already know the answer. She stands again, brushing dust from her robes like it personally offended her. Then she nods once, almost imperceptibly, and returns to her tent. You sit there a little longer. The stars continue their ancient indifference, and in the distance, a horse snorts, perhaps in agreement. Morning arrives, not with drama, but with cold fingers pulling back the edge of your blanket. The air bites at your nose. Someone is already stoking the fire. Someone else is loudly slurping tea. The camp awakens the way a river melts gradually, without asking permission. You don't open your eyes so much as admit that sleep has lost the argument. The queen, of course, is already awake. You wonder if she ever slept at all. Her tent flap is open, a neat triangle of shadow and motion. She's seated, cross-legged on a rug, brushing her long hair methodically, like a general preparing for battle. Not that there's a battle today, unless you count the 5 letters she's already dictated before breakfast. You stumble through your morning tasks. Wash your face with water so cold it feels like an accusation. Stretch your cramped fingers. Look for tea. Drink something that claims to be tea, but might also be warm horse broth. Details are fuzzy. The scribes gather again, less briskly than yesterday, the enthusiasm slightly chipped around the edges. One of them complains softly about a dream involving scrolls chasing him across a field. No one doubts this could happen. As you return to your station, you notice the queen has laid out a small, thin bundle wrapped in silk. Inside, a selection of fine brushes, blackened with years of use, and 3 small pots of inkwine, darker than night, one a warm rust brown, and one pale as smoke. A change is coming. You find out what kind when the first message arrives. It's not carried by a courier this time, but by a man with weather-beaten hands and a falcon on his arm. He bows once and hands over a tightly rolled scroll, bound not with ribbon but with a strip of woven goat wool. You don't recognize the pattern, but the queen does. She unrolls the message and reads in silence. Then she looks up. "Prepare a response," she says, "and warm your fingers." The scribes shuffle. Someone spills ink. You brace yourself. This letter, as it turns out, is going to the governor of Samarkand. The subject, rainfall, or, to be more accurate, the governor's exaggerated reports of catastrophic floods and desperate need for emergency barley supplies. Sorgatani reads the letter again, her lips twitching in what might be amusement. "You'd think the sky had personally betrayed him," she murmurs. And so, she begins dictation. The tone, polite, measured, dripping with subtle disbelief. She inquires about the state of the governor's accounting ledgers. She expresses sympathy for his challenges, while gently reminding him that previous years of drought were met with no such dramatic requests. And then, the finishing touch, a warm offer to send advisors to assist with his grain distribution. It is the 13th century version of "I'd be delighted to micromanage your incompetence." The letter includes a proverb, one of hers, not from scripture. The steppe does not exaggerate. It either withers or blooms. You file that one away. Here's your historical fact for the day. Sorgatani maintained communication networks that rivaled any formal empire. She wrote and received letters in multiple languages across thousands of miles, relying on a relay system of mounted couriers, merchant informants, and estranged birds. She made bureaucracy feel personal, and personal diplomacy feels like legislation as the scroll is finished and sealed with the rust-colored ink used. She says, "For matters of stubborn weather, a small girl arrives with a plate of steamed dumplings breakfast at last. The filling is cabbage and mystery. You eat anyway. The queen doesn't. She simply sips a strange, pale drink and stares at the horizon." "Do you know why letters matter?" she asks. "More to the horizon than to you." You glance up. Everyone pretends not to listen, because horses are fast, swords are loud, but ink lasts longer than both. She's not wrong. Your obscure tidbit of the morning. Mongol riders sometimes carried messages sealed in hollowed bones to protect them from rain and suspicion. The bones were strapped under their saddles, where nobody thought to look. You wonder how many letters have disappeared into the dirt, still perfectly dry. Waiting to be found, she rises. "We'll need a second copy," she says, in Persian, with fewer metaphors. The scribes groan quietly, but you notice she smiles, not because the day will be easy, but because it will be hers. You're not entirely sure what hour it is. The sun sits high, but not overhead. Somewhere between too late for a second breakfast and too early for complaining about your back. The camp is buzzing quietly, efficiently, like a beehive that's taken up logistics. After the morning letter to Samarkand, the Queen has moved on to more delicate matters. A marriage proposal, not hers, of course. This one concerns a minor noble from the western steppes, the daughter of a Khan too ambitious for his own lineage, and the second son of a governor who owns more horses than good ideas. It's the sort of political union that nobody asked for, but everyone has an opinion about. The Queen listens to the proposal as it's read aloud slowly, reverently, with far too many references to fertile union and the wisdom of shared herds. She says nothing for a long time, the kind of silence that encourages others to spontaneously reevaluate their life choices. Then, with a sigh, write a reply. Everyone grabs their brushes. You may express my happiness, politely, briefly. Brushes pause, then mention that the girl is 13. The older scribe across from you chokes slightly on his tea, and that we do not marry girls whose fathers cannot spell the word governance without borrowing 3 alphabets. That part doesn't make it into the letter, but you all hear it. Instead, the response that emerges is diplomatic gold, warm but firm, full of praise for the father's deep commitment to regional harmony and a vague invitation to resubmit the proposal in, say, 5 years, or 10, or never. All sealed with a delicate swish of black ink that feels suspiciously like a smirk. And here's your historical anchor for today. Sorgatani was renowned not just for military or economic strategy but for her mastery of alliance politics. She arranged marriages the way chess players sacrifice pawns carefully, reluctantly, and with the long game in mind. Her own son Kublai would later marry a woman she selected, a decision that shaped the Yuan dynasty's future court life. Follows millet porridge and something that claims to be stewed vegetables. The flavor is beige. You eat it anyway. Hunger beats curiosity. Outside, a merchant caravan passes by, headed east. They stop briefly to present small gifts, a bolt of patterned silk, a pouch of spices, and a pair of lapis-colored ink. The Queen receives them with quiet nods. The lapis stones, in particular, earn her attention. They'll make better ink than half our couriers. Make sense, she murmurs. She keeps one, hands the other to the head scribe, and instructs that the next letter be written with it, just to see how it feels. Your obscure tidbit, lapidary inkstones, were prized among Mongol and Chinese elites not just for their function, but as status symbols. Some believed the color of the ink could subtly shift the tone of a letter, a paler, bluer black, more sincerity, a darker, thicker ink, more weight, or at least more intimidation. You test the new inkstone, it grinds smoothly. The resulting ink is indeed a little blue, regal, subtle, like midnight pretending to be polite. The Queen's next letter is to a monastery in northern China. Thank you note. Of all things, apparently, the monks sent her a rare volume on astronomy, bound in lacquered wood and written in 3 languages. She praises the gift, quotes a line about stars not needing permission to shine, and promises support for a new roof. The Queen has a soft spot for scholars. She doesn't say this outright, but it's evident in the way she corrects the phrasing of her gratitude 3 times. just to make sure it sounds sincere without sounding needy. Even monks gossip, she says. You nod as if this is something you already knew, and now the wind picks up again. The tent flaps rustle like restless thoughts. One scroll slips loose and skitters across the rug. You chase it down before it escapes entirely and return to your spot. As the day leans into afternoon, the queen pauses her dictation and gazes toward the hills. I used to ride more, she says softly. The camp hushes. I would go out before dawn. No escorts, just my horse and the grass. She's not talking to you, but she is. She adjusts her sleeve, but the letters don't write themselves, and the step doesn't govern itself. And people only think they want peace until it arrives. Then they complain it's too quiet. She looks at the scroll in your hand. Still, the ink remembers. She stands, smooths her robes, and walks away. Back to her tent, back to her silence. And just like that, the day feels a little quieter than before. The wind has changed, not in a dramatic, storm is coming sort of way. More like the kind of shift that only people who live their lives beneath the sky ever notice. It's cooler now, coming from the north, and it carries the faint scent of pine, resin and damp earthod, given there are no trees for miles. Someone mutters that it'll rain next week. Someone else swears it'll snow instead. The queen hasn't commented, which means she probably already knows and is letting everyone else enjoy their small debate. You've returned to the scribe's tent, your sleeves now permanently stained with ink that no amount of rinsing seems to fix. The stone the queen gave the head scribe is still being passed around like a relic, each scribe eager to try their line in the new lapis-tinged ink, each pretending not to care that they like it too much. You are tasked with rewriting one of yesterday's letters, not because it was wrong, but because the tone was a bit sharp for a harvest festival. So, once again, you draft a message to a minor noble in the Caucasus Mountains, this time praising the resilience of his goats and the spiritual beauty of Snowmelt. It's as thrilling as it sounds. The queen doesn't sit today, she paces instead, slowly, hands clasped behind her back, her headdress swaying like a wind measuring device for power. She pauses every so often to offer a correction or raise an eyebrow, of which are equally terrifying. Today's letters, it seems, are all about the soft diplomacy of empire. Thanks, congratulations, reminders, like a giant RSVP list with the occasional veiled threat written in floral calligraphy. Your historical fact for this section: Sorghumani was known for maintaining religious tolerance throughout her territories. Christian monasteries, Muslim scholars, and Buddhist temples all received support from her administration. She once funded the construction of a madrasa and a church in the same province, possibly just to confuse the local tax collectors. One of today's letters is addressed to a Zoroastrian priest. Yes, Zoroastrians still exist, and yes, the queen treats them with the same firm respect she grants everyone. She asks, after the temple fires, praises a recent philosophical text sent by one of their scribes, and includes a small diagram of a star chart that her own scholars annotated. It's part science, part flattery, and part subtle flex. She includes this line: even the eternal flame benefits from a wind that listens. The scribes nod as they write. You try to remember it exactly. It's probably going to be misquoted for the next 50 years. By midday, the Queen halts, all writing tea, she says simply, and thus tea, not the dusty, overboiled stuff that shows up in morning bowls, but real, tea-infused with dried berries and goat milk, steeped with charcoal and something floral. She drinks hers alone, while the scribes exchange theories on whether the berries are wild juniper or just confused raisins. You sip yours. It tastes like someone tried to translate a garden into a beverage. Here's your obscure tidbit of the hour. Mongol elites often drank their tea with butter and salt, and sometimes with a pinch of dried curds. Travelers frequently mistook it for soup, which led to one confused Venetian attempting to season it with garlic. He was gently removed from the tent. As the Queen finishes her tea, a visitor arrives. Not a courier, not a noble, a shepherd, wrapped in sheepskin and carrying a cracked leather pouch. He kneels without ceremony and offers her a bundle of dyed wool and a small folded piece of cloth. The Queen accepts both with the same solemnity she gives foreign envoys. His wife weaves stories. Someone whispers to you. She embeds them in the colors. Indeed, as she unfolds the cloth, you see it's more than just dyed fabric. It's a tale woven in patterns of red and ochre, triangles representing mountains, spirals for journey, and small dark dots for loss. The Queen studies it for a long time. She says nothing but places it beside her brush case with surprising care. She then turns back to the scribes. Write a letter to his village chief. Approve the sheep rotation plan, and tell him I expect to see another blanket before winter. And just like that, diplomacy is done. The rest of the day proceeds like a river in no-rush letters drafted, recopied, and sealed with wax pressed from horn molds. You help file them in scroll cases, which are stored in a lacquered chest lined with sheepskin and old receipts from people long dead. Before the sun begins to sink, the Queen returns to her yurt. No announcement, just a shift in air and motion. You find yourself holding one of the new scrolls, its ink still damp, its script slightly crooked where someone sneezed mid-brush stroke. You gently fan it, careful not to smudge, knowing full well it's heading to someone who will read it like a holy text or a warning. As evening drapes over the steppe again, you feel something you hadn't expected. Not pride, not exhaustion, purpose, twilight. Night doesn't fall on the steppe, it simply settles in, like a guest who lets themselves inside without knocking. The sky deepens into velvet. The fires are lit again, smaller this time, more for comfort than cooking. You sit with your back against a saddlebag, a thin blanket across your shoulders, watching sparks drift upward like lazy fireflies with somewhere better to be. Today's letters are sealed. The Queen has retired. The scribes have stopped pretending they aren't tired. One is already asleep with his face on his notes. The ink on his cheek gives him the look of someone who lost a very quiet duel. You can still smell that strange juniper. Tea in the air, or maybe it's just soaked into your sleeve. Your fingers are blackened, your neck stiff, but your mind, annoyingly, is still wide awake. So you walk, just a little. The stars above are astonishing again. Too many to name, and more than seem strictly necessary. They feel close enough to hear. The silence hums, not empty, not still, just full of things you can't name. And then you see her, sorghaghhtani. Again awake. She's standing on a rise, alone, her robe catching the wind in slow ripples. No guards, no attendants, just her silhouette against the sky, looking like someone who's about to deliver either a prophecy or a tax audit. You approach quietly. She doesn't turn, but she speaks. You walk like someone with ink in their bones. You smile. You don't argue. She lifts a hand, gesturing toward the stars. When I was younger, she says, I used to believe each one was a soul, waiting to be born. You glance at her, and now I think most of them are already dead. It's not a sad line, just honest. She turns to you, a faint smile playing at the corners of her mouth, but they still shine, don't they? You sit beside her. The grass is cool and soft beneath your hands. She doesn't speak again for a while, and neither do you, which is fine. This is the kind of silence that doesn't ask for explanations. Eventually, she does break it. To write to Batu soon, she says, almost like she's apologizing. He's becoming a problem. You blink. Batu, her nephew, the conqueror of Rus and commander of the Golden Horde, a man with a reputation for patience equal to that of a hungry tiger. What sort of problem, you ask, before you can stop yourself? She sighs. The kind that thinks conquest is the same as vision. And there's your historical fact for the night. Sorghatani, while loyal to the Mongol imperial family, often found herself at odds with her male relatives, not out of rebellion, but because they kept treating leadership like a game of territory. She believed in legacy. They believed in trophies. Batu wants to send more troops into the west, she says. Says it's time to remind the kings of Hungary and Poland who we are. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. And what do you want, you ask? She looks at the stars again. I want 100 years without a war. Then, almost wistfully, just once, I'd like to receive a letter that says nothing more than the crops were good. The people are quiet, and no one has tried to build a monument to themselves in 3 months. You smile quietly. She notices. It's not funny, she says, though her voice betrays her. It's a little funny, you reply. She sighs again, but not unhappily. Here's your obscure cultural detail for this hour. Among some Mongol nobles, dreams were considered letters from ancestors. People often woke up and described them aloud, in case they were instructions or warnings. Sorghatani has never mentioned her dreams. You wonder if that's because she doesn't believe in them more, because hers are too complicated to translate. The wind shifts again, this time from the east. She pulls her robe a little tighter. You offer her your blanket without thinking. She doesn't take it, but nods in approval. The gesture is enough. You should sleep, she says. You don't argue. As you walk back to the tent, you hear her voice one last time, soft and behind you. Tomorrow we write to Persia. And just like that, the stars above seem to blink a little more slowly, maybe out of respect, maybe out of relief, because when she writes to Persia, the entire steppe listens. Quiet. Dawn is less a moment and more a processa, slow exhale of light across the grasslands. Brushing the tents, the horses, and the restless crows perched on a distant supply wagon. You wake to the sound of water boiling and someone singing softly, off-key. Your blanket has slipped halfway off. Your back is politely reminding you that the ground is not, in fact, ergonomic. You sit up, slowly, stretch. Your knees crack in protest. Across the camp, The scribes are already stirring, rubbing their eyes and comparing notes on dream letters no one quite remembers. The queen's yurt is still closed, a rare thing. She's given instructions. No letters this morning. Instead, she wants the scribes to prepare ceremonial copies of past correspondence letters written in both Mongolian and Persian, adorned with gold leaf, meant to be stored in lacquered boxes and shown to visiting dignitaries who enjoy being reminded of their place. You're assigned to help prepare the inks. This sounds boring, and it is, but it's also surprisingly meditative. You sit cross-legged in the sun, slowly grinding minerals into pigment. The gold leaf is applied with a brush so fine it could double as a spider's leg. The characters glint in the light, delicate and sharp, like tiny swords drawn in perfect formation. The queen eventually emerges. She doesn't say a word, just walks quietly from her yurt and stands over the work. She inspects one letter, then another. Finally, good, keep going. You'd expect a thank you, or at least a well done. But instead, she offers the highest Mongol compliment available. You didn't waste ink. You smile to yourself. You'll take it. Today's major letter will be sent to the vizier of Tabriz.yes-Persia. The queen has been preparing this one for days. It's not just about trade, though that's the official reason. It's about presence, influence, a reminder that the steps don't begin and end with cavalry charges, they extend on paper. In the slow drift of ink from brush to scroll. Here's your historical fact. Sorgatani maintained regular contact with Persian officials and scholars. Some accounts suggest she even corresponded with physicians and philosophers directly, requesting translations and offering gifts in exchange. One of her letters, preserved in fragments, reportedly contained a detailed question about irrigation practices near Isfahantukt, right between two sentences about royal genealogy. This current letter opens with a blessing for the vizier's health, his family, and his library. Then, with barely a breath between the phrases, it transitions into a request for updated maps, a critique of recent census inconsistencies, and a politely ruthless analysis of Persian grain exports. The queen is dictating at full speed now. You write quickly, brushing each line in a steady rhythm, pausing only when she adjusts, a word replacing helpful with consistent, pleased with willing, and partnership with understanding, which in this context may be more of a warning than a compliment. The scroll is finished just before noon. It's beautiful, heavy, but elegant. The kind of document that whispers, I am both smarter and more powerful than you, and I'm being very polite about it. It is sealed with her personal emblem, pressed into deep red wax using a carved stone stamp. The symbol is a falcon above a scroll, her preferred order of operations. Here's your obscure tidbit. While most of the Mongol elite used the Tamga seal of their tribe or clan, Sorgatani had her own variations, slightly altered, a touch more stylized. Historians argue over whether it was a symbol of independence or simply better graphic design. Either way, it was hers alone. The courier who receives the scroll is young, lean, and clearly terrified. He bows twice, mounts his horse, and vanishes toward the southern horizon before anyone can change their mind. And then the queen does something rare. She laughs, just once, quietly, a small, dry sound, like wind catching a silk tent flap. It won't arrive in time, she says, but it will arrive when it should. No one asks what that means. She calls for lunch. Boiled lentils and soft flatbread served with a tart yogurt sauce that makes everyone blink a few times too many. The scribes eat in near silence, still processing the speed and precision of the morning's letter. You glance at your fingers, again stained, this time with gold dot. Across from you, a scribe holds up his hand and squints at the ink under his nails. Do you think this will come off? Another replies, eventually, or never, depending on your sins. You don't ask which category you're in. As lunch ends, the queen rises and speaks to no one in particular. We'll write to the Syrian monks tomorrow. And with that, she vanishes back into her tent. The rest of you sit a little longer, hands resting on bowls, brushes, or knees, unsure whether to stand or simply let the sun do the deciding. Another day of letters is done, and still the ink does not sleep. The afternoon stretches out like an old scroll faded at the edges, full of creases and a little too long in places. You find yourself nodding off mid-phrase, the rhythm of ink and brush lulling your senses into something softer than sleep, but just shy of useful. The scribes around you are no better. One has begun copying letters upside down by mistake. Another keeps dipping his brush into his tea, which now tastes faintly of ink and regret. And then the queen does something unusual. She tells everyone to stop writing. Go walk, she says. Go listen to the wind. It's talking. No one questions it. You step outside, grateful for the excuse. The air is dry but kind, and the sun hangs low, painting the tents in long golden stripes. You follow a path worn into the grass by thousands of boots, hooves, and decisions. It leads past the cook fires, beyond the tethered horses, out toward a ridge where the hills soften and the silence deepens. You find yourself alone, almost. The queen is already there, seated on a flat stone, legs folded, arms resting on her knees, as still as the horizon. Her robe flutters slightly in the breeze, like a slow breath. She doesn't look at you, but gestures to the stone beside her. You sit. She says nothing for a long while. You match her silence, staring at the hills. Then she speaks, her voice low, almost bored. Do you know what I miss? You shake your head. She doesn't wait. Buying things, you blink. She continues. When I was young, before any of this, I used to go to the markets with my mother. No guards, no scribes, just the two of us, and an argument over dried apricots. You smile. She doesn't. There was a man there who sold ink sticks shaped like turtles, completely impractical, smelled like cinnamon. I bought one every time. A pause. I haven't bought anything in years. I only approve things now. The wind shifts. A hawk cries in the distance. And there's your historical fact. Sorgatani was once praised by foreign envoys for her careful oversight of trade policy. She regulated prices on certain goods, enforced ethical treatment of caravan merchants, and personally reviewed contracts involving rare imports. Silk, spices, and books all passed through her judgment. But, as she's just confessed, rarely through her own hands. She looks at you. You ever write something you didn't mean to? You nod too quickly. She smiles, just enough. Good. That means you're still thinking. She stands, brushing off her robe, and starts walking back. You follow, careful to step in her footprints, not out of ritual, but because the ground seems a little more solid where she's been. As you re-enter the camp, something odd happens. The queen stops at the tent of a wool weaver, the same woman whose husband brought the woven story cloth a few days ago. She steps inside briefly. When she emerges, she's holding something. A small pouch, heavy, wrapped in blue thread. She hands it to you. For the ink, she says. Yours now. You open it later, back at the scribe tent. Inside, 3 turtle-shaped ink sticks. They do, faintly, smell like cinnamon. You're not sure if it's a joke or a memory she handed to you on purpose. Either way, you hide them under your blanket, like something sacred or ridiculous. Here's your obscure tidbit: Mongol nobility, though often associated with stern leather and grim steel, had a private affection for whimsy. Trinkets, charms, small carved animals, these were often tucked into pockets or saddle pouches, never discussed aloud, but always present. Scholars still puzzle over their meanings. Later that evening, the queen gathers everyone again. She's ready to write one final letter for the day. It's short, simple, no political stakes. It's to a boy in her household, gardenered in a fall, convalescing near the river camp. She sends him a scroll of jokes. Yes, jokes. Old step riddles. And puns about goats and yak butter. One involves a shaman, a lost sandal, and a very confused marmot. As you copy it down, brush shaking from trying not to laugh, the queen watches you with something close to approval. Not everything has to be serious, she says. You write the final line in lapis ink. Even the wind laughs when no one is watching. And as the scroll is sealed and sent, the sun finally bows out behind the ridge, and the camp breathes in, slowly, preparing for sleep once more. Ask ChatGPT. The wind picks up overnight. By morning, the entire camp feels as though it's been gently rearranged by invisible hands. The tents creak and lean slightly eastward. Someone's saddle has migrated 10 feet from where it was. Your blanket is full of dust and a small pine cone that definitely wasn't there yesterday. You consider this a minor miracle, as there are no pine trees for miles. You rise slowly, joints popping like rice in a hot pan. The scribes are already grumbling over breakfast. The porridge is saltier than usual today, possibly on purpose, possibly a mistake. No one's sure. No one asks. The queen doesn't appear at first light, which causes a brief ripple of unease. Then a guard quietly announces that she's requested a change of pace today. A ride. No letter writing until afternoon. This is both exciting and alarming. You're not entirely sure how to interpret a change of pace from a woman whose normal speed is imperial inevitability. Still, you saddle a horse and join the procession. The queen rides at the front, posture straight, expression unreadable. Her horse is a tall roan with a white blaze and a tendency to snort like it has strong opinions. She wears no crown, no crests, just a simple traveling robe of dark green felt and her usual belt of polished bronze. She looks, you realize, more like a shepherd than a sovereign, and yet everyone gives her the entire road. The party rides north, along a narrow trail that hugs the curves of a slow river. Birds follow you, flitting through the air like flying punctuation. The sound of hooves is steady, comforting. You begin to understand why she does this, and there's your historical fact for the day. Sorgatani was known to travel frequently even when she could have stayed put in a palace. She visited markets, courts, villages, and monasteries in person. Her authority was not just written in ink, but carried on horseback, reinforced by presence. People trusted her, not because she ruled from a distance, but because she arrived. Eventually, she stops. You're standing on a small ridge above a shallow valley. There are no monuments here, no temples, just wind and grass and a few piles of stones, markers of something ancient and nameless. She dismounts. So do you. She walks to one of the stones and kneels, not in reverence, exactly, more in familiarity. These are older than anything we write, she says. You glance at the stones. They're crude, half-buried, and flecked with lichen. Missed them entirely. They say warriors were buried here, she continues. Not kings, not khans, just the ones who never made it home. You pause. Do you come here often? You ask. Only when I remember not to forget. And that sentence sits with you for a while. Here's your obscure detail. Step memorials were often marked not by inscriptions but by placement. The orientation of the stones, the direction they faced, and the shape of the surrounding landall were part of a silent grammar the Mongols understood. It was a language without letters, but not without meaning. She remains there for a few minutes, then rises, brushing dust from her knees. No need to mention this in any scroll, she says. You nod, you won't. The ride back is slower, quieter. The wind is now behind you, as if gently ushering you home. When the camp reappears on the horizon, it feels smaller than you remembered. Not in a disappointing way, more like the world outside just grew a little bigger back in the tent. The scribes resume their duties. You join them, this time with ink that's dried slightly in the midday sun, forcing you to grind it anew. Feels appropriate. The queen begins dictating again, this time letters to 2 border towns. Requests for census updates, yes, but also for oral histories. She wants stories of floods and famines, of good years and strange ones. Not for political reasons, just for the record. You can't govern what you don't remember, she says, as if that's obvious. She also includes a peculiar line in one letter. Ask if the moon was red the night the river shifted. No one questions it. The scribe just writes it down, and as the sun leans westward, you find yourself copying a passage from one of her earlier scrolls, an old one, addressed to a now-dead envoy about trade routes through the mountains. It ends with a sentence that surprises you. When you walk the same road twice, do not assume it leads to the same place. You pause over it, reread it, then copy it again, just in case it's meant for you. The queen doesn't speak for the rest of the evening, but she does come to stand behind you once, looking over your shoulder, watching as you blot the ink. She says, "Your lines are straighter now." And then, after a moment, you're listening, and you are. The camp wakes to mist. Not rain, not fogged, just mist, soft and damp, curling around the tents like a cat deciding where to sleep. Everything is a little quieter than usual, even the horses. The fire crackles without ambition. Your breath puffs. No conversation unless necessary. This is rare. The scribes exchange glances, unsure if this means something ominous or something sacred. You quietly vote for sacred. You're wrong. At mid-morning, she emerges, scroll in hand, lips pressed in a line that has very little poetry in it. 2 letters today, she says, both short, both dangerous. No one breathes too loudly. The first letter is to a commander stationed near the Amu Darya, man who has, apparently, begun rewriting parts of his orders to suit his own ambitions. The queen does not shout, she does not curse, she simply dictates a message that starts with, "It must be difficult to misread such simple instructions," and ends with, "Please be reminded who holds the brush that names your rank," and there. But her corrections were permanent. Her letters were reviewed in silence, reread in private, and sometimes left on desks for days, as if the parchment itself needed time to cool off. The second letter is harder. It's personal. It's to one of her sons, not Kublanat today, but his younger brother Arik Beko, currently stationed further east, among the restless tribes of the Altai. His reports have been vague, his tone deflective. The queen suspects no. She knows he's being influenced by an advisor who favors military over diplomacy. Her words are spare. She reminds him that strength is not the same as weight, that loyalty is not something you inherit, it's something you practice, and that sons who try to command without first understanding often end up leading silence. You don't write that last line. She does. Her own hand, her own ink. You glance down at the brush she uses. It's older than the others. The hairs are split at the end, the wood worn smooth where thumb and forefinger meet. It has no ornament. It's a working tool, not ceremonial, as she writes. The entire tent waits. Even the fire seems unsure whether to crackle. She finishes the letter and seals it with clear wax-no pigment. No emblem, just heat and pressure. Then she speaks. To lead a family is harder than an army, and you believe her. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for today. Among the Mongols, leadership wasn't inherited without consent. Even sons of Khans had. A mother's favor carried influence, yes, but it wasn't a guarantee. Sorgatani didn't just raise Sunshine, built alliances around them, like scaffolding, so they wouldn't collapse under their own pride. After the letters are sent, the queen requests no more writing today. Instead, she wants to hear stories, not official ones, real ones. So you all gather near the fire. The sun begins to pierce the mist, turning it into ribbons of light. The queen sits on a worn cushion, hair unbound, for the first time in weeks, and gestures toward the oldest scribe. "Tell us something useless," she says. He blinks. "Something that won't help an empire," she adds. "Something no one needs to know." And so he begins. A tale about a goat that refused to eat anything but fermented apples. About a child who believed her shadow was a spirit that followed her for protection. About a merchant who once claimed he traded dreams between cities using clay pots and honey. Everyone laughs, even the queen. She doesn't speak again that evening, but she listens. Eyes half closed, hands resting on her lap. She doesn't nod, she doesn't smile, but you can tell she's storing each word. As the night deepens, you find yourself staring into the fire, remembering every letter you've written for her. Every message sent is like a ripple through water, shaping lives far beyond your own reach. And then you remember something she said days ago. Ink lasts longer than horses. You believe her more now than ever. Tomorrow she write again, but tonight is for stories no one needs and memories that don't ask to be remembered. There's frost on your blanket this morning, not snow, not nice, just a delicate crust of cold, like the sky's quiet reminder that seasons don't need your permission to shift. You rub your hands together, brush off the glittering white layer, and pull on your boots slowly, as if each lace is a paragraph in a letter you're not ready to send. The camp is subdued. Horses snort little clouds of steam into the air. Fires burn low. Even the scribes are unusually quiet, clutching bowls of hot millet-like relics of a simpler life. The queen appears just after sunrise, dressed not in her usual layered robe, but in a simpler travel cloak, fur-lined and worn at the edges. There's ink on her fingers already. This, you've learned, means something's been bothering her since before she woke up. She doesn't greet anyone, just walks straight into the tent and lays out 6 sheets of parchment thick, dyed in faint gradients from ivory to pale green, pressed flat with stones at each corner. "We are writing to Baghdad today," she says. A pause. Then, "and to someone older than Baghdad." You blink, and there's your historical fact. In the mid-13th century, Sorgatani maintained ties not just with political leaders, but with intellectual centers across the Islamic world. She exchanged correspondence with scholars in Baghdad, particularly those linked to the famed House of Wisdom, a hub of learning where Greek, Persian, and Indian texts were translated, preserved, and debated long after their original empires faded. The first letter she dictates is to a librarian, with no titles, no rank, but a reputation for remembering every line of every scroll he's ever handled. She compliments the scholar's work, references an obscure passage on water clocks, and includes a personal question. "What ink do you trust when you copy sorrow?" No one dares ask what she means. You write it as softly as you can. The second letter is stranger. It's addressed to a woman known only by her pen name, the bird without nest, a mystic, a poet, possibly a philosopher, possibly a fraud. She lives somewhere in the Zagros Mountains, or perhaps she doesn't live anywhere at all. The queen met her once briefly, years ago, during a storm. They shared a campfire and half a bowl of soup, and apparently that was enough to warrant a lifelong literary relationship. "Tell her the stars over the steppe are flickering again," the queen says, "and that I remembered her question about the sound of silk in the wind." You don't ask what that question was, you write it down anyway. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Mongol nobility often maintained informal correspondences with mystics, seers, and wandering poets, people who held no land, no office, but carried a kind of social gravity that couldn't be taxed or measured. Their words sometimes influenced policy more than gold or soldiers. By midday, the scrolls are finished, wrapped in protective felt, bound with braided thread, marked not with wax seals, but with pressed flower petals, blue and yellow and pale orange, for the road to recognize them, the queen says. She rests after lunch, reclining in the shadow of her tent, eyes closed, but fingers still twitching slightly, like she's composing another sentence in her sleep. The scribes take turns practicing ornamental script on scrap parchment. One begins copying a phrase she used earlier, "ink that remembers sorrow," over and over, until the strokes become almost a rhythm. You, though, are sent to the supply cart to restock brushes. While there, you find something odd, a folded scrap of silk, hidden between 2 scroll cases. On it, in faint handwriting, are 5 words. "Even the moon forgets sometimes." You show it to the queen. She glances at it. "Ah," she says, "that's hers, the bird." She tucks it into her sleeve, doesn't explain further. Later, just before the sun begins its descent, the queen requests one more letter, a short one, to the girl who weaves. She says, "You fetch the materials, expecting formality." But what she dictates is more like a conversation. "The blanket you made has outlived 3 of my advisors. It is warm, and so are you. Tell your father the sheep rotation plan was clever. I'm stealing it for the western provinces. Let him feel powerful about it. He won't stop grinning for a week. You smile as you write," she adds softly, "and tell her the stars are flickering again. Then, quieter, she'll know what I mean." You fold the letter yourself, more carefully than usual. Wrap it in wool cloth. You wonder how many people in the empire get a letter like that. One without strategy, without stakes, just a thank you. Disguised as poetry, the wind rises again as night falls. You return to your tent, the scent of pressed petals and old ink still clinging to your sleeves. As you lie down, the image of the queen ink-stained and fur-draped, writing to people no one else remembers, lingers behind your eyes like an afterimage from staring at the sun too long. You drift off before the last ember fades, and somewhere out there, a scroll moves slowly through the hills. The final morning arrives without ceremony. No trumpet of light, no prophetic dream, just a thin curtain of dawn, slipping across the sky like a whisper, too polite to wake anyone you stretch. Your blanket is tangled. There's hay in your sleeve, and a suspicious ink stain on your collarbone you absolutely don't remember earning. The scribes move a little slower today, not from laziness, but because something in the air says this is the last page. No one says it aloud. You all just know. The queen is already up. She's standing at the edge of the camp, staring toward the far horizon, as if it might write something back. She's not dressed for riding or ceremony, just her riding robes, soft, wrinkled, familiar. Today, she says, will be for closing loops. First, letter to the same minor noble you wrote 2-3 weeks ago about the goats and the snowmelt. This one thanks him for a gift. He apparently sent a small bag of dried apricots and a poem about wind. She responds with a gentle suggestion that metaphors should avoid comparing queens to livestock. He meant it nicely, probably, she returns. The favor by calling him steadfast as an underfed ox. It's a compliment, barely. Second letter to a widowed teacher in Samarkand, whose students transcribed one of the queen's previous scrolls and sent her notes in 5 different alphabets. The queen is delighted. She includes a fresh sheet of parchment with a riddle in Mongolian and a flower petal glued to the corner. Scholars, centuries later, will find it and debate what it meant. It meant she liked the riddle. Third letter to herself. This one she doesn't dictate. She writes it, slowly, alone, head bent low over the parchment. You see her brush pause, just once, in the middle of a sentence. Not a mistake. A memory, maybe. When she finishes, she folds the letter and places it in a carved wooden box. She seals it not with wax, but with twine and a soft knot. Bury it, she tells you. You do, quietly, near the stone where she once spoke of the warriors who never made it home. No one else sees. Here's your final historical fact, Sorgatani. Letters, while mostly lost to time, were spoken of long after her death, not just for their precision, but for their tone. They were said to listen as much as they spoke. Even her political rivals admitted they'd never seen a woman wield silence so fluently. In the afternoon, she calls for the scribes to pack up the scrolls. Not everything, she says, just the ones that feel like they'll travel well. There's debate about what that means, but no one asks. She walks among the tents slowly now, nodding at faces, touching shoulders, and occasionally giving instructions in the form of metaphors. No one will understand until it's too late. You follow her at a distance, back near her yurt. She pauses beside the girl who weaves. The child hands her a new cloth, this one blue and white, stitched in tight curves like river paths or sound waves. The queen runs her fingers along it once, then hands it back. Tell your story next time, she says. As the sun tilts westward, the queen sits, one last time, with you, just you. You offer her tea. She accepts. She says nothing for a long while. Finally, she says, everything ends, even letters. You nod, then she adds, but someone always finds them again, in dust or in dreams. You don't write it down. You don't have to. She stands, brushes a bit of dust from her sleeve, and heads into her tent one last time. You watch the flap settle behind her like a drawn curtain, wind down 300 words. Now the camp grows quiet. The horses chew in slow rhythm. The fire exhales its last breath. The scrolls are stacked neatly, tied with ribbon or twine, their ink drying like leaves pressed in a book no one will open for a very long time. You sit beside the fading coals, watching the night arrive not with drama but with patience. The stars blink slowly awake. You remember the letters, the stories, the goats, the time you used juniper tea as ink because someone knocked over the real supply, the poem about the wind, the child who wove rivers, the queen who didn't shout. You feel the ground beneath you, steady, soft. You feel the last brushstroke of the story curling into stillness. No more messages to send, just the quiet of parchment at rest. You lie down. The sounds of the camp drift past like smoke's oft footsteps. Distant laughter, the shiver of tent flaps in the breeze. Above you, the stars flicker. You think about the moon. Even it forgets. Sometimes that's all right. You close your eyes. Somewhere, ink cools on a scroll no one will read. Somewhere, a rider carries a letter into tomorrow. And here, in the hush between moments, you are still at last, still at home. Sleep now. The queen will wait.